Okay, I think we're good to go. Great, thank you. And thanks for all of the feedback in the chat as well. I think definitely some really interesting themes in there. I think for me, it's around the colleagues, the team, and yeah, all of the amazing people that work in NHS finance that keep me motivated day to day. So yeah, I'm sure we'll pick up a number of those themes as we go through in the next hour or so. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our Women in Leadership for Finance Network. I'm Sarah Griffiths. I'm the CFO at Cambridge and Peterborough ICB. And it's really great that you can all make the time this afternoon during a really, really busy period for us in NHS Finance to talk about some of the themes that are really important to our network and us as finance leaders. So it's really a pleasure to welcome you to today's topic, which is progressing with purpose in high pressure roles. Today we're going to hear from a couple of really great speakers. So we've got Chris and Nyasha, who will introduce themselves in a few minutes. They're going to be sharing their perspectives on how they navigate the demands of leadership roles, how they stay focused on their own purpose, and also how they can build careers and any insights for how we can all build careers that align with our professional ambition and also our personal values as well. Just by way of a bit of an intro, I guess finance professionals in the NHS, I think we all know now more than ever about what it works to work, how it feels, I should say, to work in a high pressure environment. I think the context that we're in right now is probably one of the most challenged that we've seen in recent years. We're trying to respond to delivering financial sustainability with supporting transformation, responding to ever increasing demand, and at the same time trying to balance all of that with providing the right amount of care and improving outcomes for our population. So that's a really, really tall ask and does absolutely contribute to a high pressure environment. In the finance teams, I think across all NHS organisations, we're being asked to do more than ever before. The asks are bigger, the timescales are tighter, and in that kind of environment, it can be quite easy for career progression to be something that sort of happens to us in the background as we move around from role to role, or perhaps not happen at all because our existing roles just respond to the latest asks and the latest challenge, and there doesn't feel like there's the capacity or the headspace to move on. Today's theme, I think, progressing with purpose, really talks to some of that and just asks us really to take a step back, think a little bit more carefully and intentionally around leadership and career development, and that'll be different for all of us, and we'll kind of explore some of that through those themes. There's a couple of things that spring to mind for me in terms of this theme. So I guess, a few questions. What does it mean to build a career that is successful but also sustainable as well, personally and professionally? How do we get that clarity, if you like, between our values and our priorities while we're in these roles that are and can be really quite demanding? And I guess the other area for me is how do we support others to progress, particularly where there's lots of competing demands on our time and where visible and strong leadership is really, really important and really matters in this space. So I'm sure we'll get into some of those items as we progress through the next sort of 50 minutes or so. So why don't we get started? I think I'll hand over first of all to Chris, if that's okay, for a little bit of an intro, and then we'll move on to Nyasha, and then we'll move on to some Q&A after that. So Chris, to you.
Lovely, thanks Sarah. Hi everyone. I feel really nervous. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I feel really nervous. But it's nice to meet you all today. And I hope those of you with children had a lovely Mother's Day yesterday and your kids washed all of the dishes and did all of the housework so that you didn't have to. If it's anything like my house, you still did all the housework yourself. Anyway, so my name's Chris. I'm Chris Mackenzie, and I am the Executive Director of Finance and Information at Gateshead Health. It's a corporate role, but I've got specific responsibility for finance and for information. I'm also the only parent of 3 children, so they are now 19, 14 and 12, and those things are really important and matter in how I lead in work. I'm sharing that information up front with you because I don't think that our leadership exists separately from life. how we show up at work is really, really shaped by what we're carrying outside of it. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about that later on. I think it's particularly true in high pressure sectors like the NHS, as Sarah's just articulated before. So we're talking about progressing with purpose. So let me tell you a little bit about my career so far. My career hasn't been planned or mapped out, but every decision that I've made with intent. So it's slightly different to setting out to wanting to be a finance director, but I've acted with intent throughout. Early on, my focus was really simple, to be fair. It was about becoming technically strong and really credible in what I was doing. And over time, it's shifted a little bit from progressing in roles to maximising the impact for the patients that we serve and the population that we look after. So my interest in the NHS started really, really early on in life. My brother was born with a physical disability, and much of his childhood and my childhood was spent in hospitals while he underwent a lot of surgery and therapy. And I used to do his therapy sessions with him. I remember getting into the swimming pool with the physio and doing a lot of his sessions with him. And that exposure gave me a real deep respect for healthcare and for the people who work in it and for the NHS. So because of that experience, I thought I wanted to be a physiotherapist. I applied to university, I didn't get a place, and I ended up studying healthcare systems instead. That was the healthcare systems around the world, not just the NHS. And after that, almost by accident, I applied for an NHS graduate training scheme. I posted off a form, that's how old I am. It was a physical form you filled in and posted off. It wasn't done electronically then. And a few weeks later, I got invited to an assessment centre. That's where it really began for me. Being a trainee was an absolute privilege, and I don't say that lightly. I was able to work across a lot of providers. I worked across commissioners. I worked in local government, so I was based in Merthyr, which is in the Welsh Valleys, and I worked for the Welsh Assembly Government. I worked for internal audit, external audit, counter fraud, voluntary sector, local authorities, even police and fire services as well. So it was a great exposure. And what mattered most in that wasn't necessarily the breadth of what I did, but it was more the people who took a chance on me and spent time teaching me and really teaching me about leadership and management styles as well. I left the scheme early, so it was a 3.5-year scheme, but I left it early because the organisation who was my host offered me what I call a proper job, with a commitment to support my professional qualification progression at the time. And I moved into a commissioning role not long after that because somebody I'd worked for in the graduate training post previously had actively encouraged me to apply and backed me to work in their organisation as well. And really, that's the pattern that's repeated throughout my career. I've progressed, not really because I had a perfect plan, I didn't, but I just worked hard, built relationships and was willing to step into roles that stretched and challenged me really. So after I was based in Wales, I had a short relocation from Wales back up to the northeast. You might be able to tell by my accent, I am a native of the northeast. I've stayed in the NHS because it's the purpose that's always mattered to me. I don't think careers are linear. I think they're shaped by opportunity, time and organisational need, and the skill is in recognising the moments that matter and being brave enough to act at that time. I have faced some professional challenges, including discrimination as a woman, a pregnant woman as well, and a working mother. It's challenging working in, it has been challenging at times when I've worked in environments that hadn't necessarily aligned with my own values. As I'm sure you'll find out through the conversation today, my values are one of the most important things that I won't compromise on. And it's in those moments that I think I worked hard to influence change, but I've also learned that actually sometimes the most self-respecting decision is to move on. I think you can stay too long if you realise that you're not able to influence change in a situation. The most difficult period of my life came when professional and personal worlds deteriorated at the same time. So it's one thing, I think, managing change at work when home's okay and vice versa, but it's different when both under a lot of strain. So as I was tackling financial recovery, a little disclaimer, we've got a bit of a financial deficit here in Gateshead that we're dealing with. So as I was tackling financial recovery here and challenging behaviours and also culture, I was actually leaving an abusive marriage at the same time. So when harm crossed the line and my children were affected, I stepped away from work completely for 3 months. I didn't see that as a weakness. I thought it was actually good leadership, because it's not just in the way that we usually talk about it, is it? I think my priority was protecting my children at the time. Once they were safe, I rested myself, recalibrated, and returned to work. And actually, unfortunately for people in work, with a much clearer sense of perspective as well. I used to hear the phrase quite a lot, you should put your own oxygen mask on first, and it sounded nice, but quite unrealistic at times, but actually it's quite transformational. I don't think that I get everything right, but there are some things that I do consistently. So I turn up for myself. I was just talking to Sarah as we came on the call. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning to go to the gym. I recognise when I need help and I let people in because actually people do want to help. It's not a weakness. I never compromise my values, so integrity for me matters more than convenience. And I always put the patients at the centre of everything that we do from a work perspective as well. I work really hard with relationships at home and at work. When I get things wrong, I look to repair. I actually apologise to my children if I think I haven't done things right at home and look for feedback, and I take that feedback seriously in both professional and my personal life. And I think what I've learned more than anything is that sustainable leadership isn't actually about coping, it's about alignment, probably between values, boundaries, and the impact that you want to have as well. So if there's one thing I would say as part of this sort of opening introduction, it's that you don't necessarily have to have a perfect plan. You just need a bit of direction, intent, courage to make decisions that are right for you as an individual, even when they're hard and they can be quite difficult at times. But just remember your purpose, and our purpose is our patients. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today, particularly about pressure, purpose, and how we build leadership and careers that are quite meaningful, but also survivable as well. So I'll stop talking there, Sarah. I hope that was okay by way of a quick introduction.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it was more than okay. Thanks. It was really, really enlightening. And personally, I quite like that theme around, you know what it takes personally to keep your resilience on track, and that alignment and balance between the personal and professional boundaries, I think is absolutely spot on, and something that, yeah, we all kind of just need to be really clear around in terms of how we keep that balance in check, basically. But yeah, thank you. Really great intro.
Thank you.
Let me come now to Nyasha, please, for a bit of an introduction. Hi, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. So my name is Nyasha Mtuma, and as you can see from the very long job title that I have, I am the Director of Financial Partnerships, Contracts and Efficiency at West Herts. And I guess I'll give you a little bit of a background to my story. Just a disclaimer, I did not plan to be where I am today. That was definitely not part of the plan. But I think as Kate just said, you just have to keep on pushing through and find a way for yourself. So I'll go back to my uni days. So at uni, I had a plan to graduate and get a job in finance, either consultancy or working for a big firm like P&G or IBM or Lenovo or something. Life heard my plan and said, yeah, right, we're not doing that. We're going to give you a global financial crisis instead, and you have to figure out your way from there. So I was meant to graduate in 2008, but I took a sandwich year to work for Lenovo because I wanted some real life work experience. So by the time I came back, the financial crisis had hit, and there weren't that many grad schemes offering jobs anymore. So I was like, okay, what do I do now? My program director actually told me about the NHS. As far as I was concerned, the NHS was only for doctors and nurses. I'd never, ever thought that they had corporate roles. So by the time I looked into the graduate scheme, the applications had actually closed. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I looked around at other public sector jobs. And then I also looked at local hospitals to see what was available. Luckily, at the time, Ealing Hospital had just implemented an internal training scheme, which was completely aligned with the NHS grad scheme competencies. So that's what I applied for, and I got the job. So that's how my journey started. It wasn't through like a brilliantly laid out plan or anything, but it was just pushing through that resilience that we just spoke about and making the best of the situation that was in front of me. So I started at Ealing in October 2009, and I started in the income and SLR team. And that was like being dropped in at the deep end. It was nothing like I'd ever learned about in uni. SLR, yeah, we'd done ABC costing, so it was kind of similar, but not the same. So it was quite a big learning curve. And then a few months later, early 2010, I then discovered I was pregnant. So I was newly married, working full time, studying for CIMA and dealing with pregnancy all at once. And I sat my first set of exams. I had quite a few exemptions, but I sat my first set of exams, I think, in the summer. And I remember falling asleep in one of my exams because I was so tired and so heavily pregnant. However, I did pass that particular exam. So what that taught me was remaining positive and just continuing to push through, even when everything felt like it was stacked against me, and finding a way to keep on going. So I then had my daughter in October 2010. And then I was back at work about 4 months later because I only qualified for SMP. I hadn't worked in the NHS long enough to be able to qualify for OMP. So it wasn't ideal, but I didn't have a choice. Thankfully, I did have some support to help me with childcare. And when I came back into work, I moved into the management accounts rotation. And this is where I realized that actually I'm really interested in the story behind how you build the numbers. So I started really working closely with what was then titled the senior finance manager and budget holders, and starting to learn all about management accounts. And I thought, oh yeah, this is where I want my career to go. This is exactly what I want to do. In the meantime, I was also looking for other jobs. So unfaithful. But then Ealing asked me to stay, and then they promoted me to a Band 7 finance manager. So I went from being a trainee to then being a manager of trainees. And this was sort of like my first leadership role. And I was still trying to figure out myself and motherhood and everything that came with that. So after that, I then got a new manager, senior finance manager, who wasn't a particularly strong leader, and he didn't have an NHS background. So I was trying to learn from someone who was also trying to learn how to work in the NHS. So I had to end up leaning on other senior finance managers for support. I learned through a lot of trial and error and a lot of humility. I made some mistakes, but I was really fortunate that because of how Ealing and the culture there was, it was a learning environment, and the leaders saw that I wasn't necessarily being supported as well as I could. So even though I did make mistakes, there was a lot of space for me to learn from those. And I also then learned how to accept feedback, whether good or bad, because that's actually how you grow. And even up till now in my career, I thrive on feedback, whatever that feedback looks like. I want to hear it because I want to keep on improving. So that whole experience sort of shaped the kind of leader that I wanted to be. I was quite clear that I wanted to be someone who shows up for people, someone who supports others, and someone who doesn't hide behind a title. Fast forward a little bit to my first 8A job in 2013 at Hillingdon. So I got that, and my then boss, Suzanne, said the way I presented, I turned up looking very proper, very formal. And I did actually try to present as this corporate, top professional, top baddie, because I thought, okay, it's a big girl job, it's an 8A job. This is how you have to present. You're a manager now. And then I met the rest of the team. They were professional, but not super corporate at all. And they were just human and authentic. It was a really good team that I worked with. And that's where I learned how to be my authentic self. There was a lot of banter. But what we did do is we motivated each other to be the best that we could be. So all of us were working to be our very best, even though there was banter and everything. We were allowed to develop our interests and our personalities while still delivering. So that job was working with women's and children's. And then for those who remember Northwest London back then, we were doing Shaping a Healthier Future, which was moving maternity and pediatrics from Ealing Hospital to other hospitals within Northwest London. So as I was working with women's and children and implementing that, I was really interested now in the operational side of things. And I was like, okay, this is how this works. Again, that curiosity behind the numbers. What exactly does all this mean? So I started falling in love more and more with the operational side of the role. And then the rug was pulled out from under me. It was a bit of a promotion, but then I was moved to medicine in A&E, and I was a little bit heartbroken. But because I was so interested in the operational side. So because of that, when a business manager role came up, which I guess today you would call sort of like a senior service manager for operations, I went for it and I got the job. So that role was really intense. And I quickly had to learn about PTLs, theatre lists, cancer waiting times, rotas, working with consultants, the junior doctors, plus being an on-call manager. No 2 days at work were the same. However, I did enjoy the challenge. I loved the fact that nothing was ever the same, that you'd come in with a plan at 8 a.m. thinking this is what I'm going to get up to today. And then, things just happen. You're in major incident, or there's no registrar to cover theatre, there's no registrar to cover A&E, and you're running around trying to figure all of that out and find it. It also interested me because obviously I'd been a finance manager before. So I wanted to know, why is it that we're always spending on agency? Why is it that we're always asking for bank? What is it? Why can't you plan prior? So I sort of learned all of that in that role. And I think having that previous experience actually helped me to then start to communicate some of these things to consultants and other doctors about, this is what it looks like on the other side. And then obviously I got to see what it looked like at the coalface, so to say. After 18 months or so, I was offered to do the Nye Bevan program as part of BAME development, and also an opportunity to apply for an 8D head of PMO role. I turned both of those down. I didn't feel that I was ready. I thought, for Nye Bevan, I thought, oh, you have to already be a deputy director of operations for you to be able to go for that, or you want to go for a board level role. And I was definitely not in that sort of headspace, and I thought I needed more operational experience. And by that time, I was also juggling my childcare alone, because by then I was divorced, and my daughter was in breakfast and after school club every day, Monday to Friday, 7:30 till 6. If you turned up before 6, she'd make you wait in the car until it was 6 o'clock, because she really loved after school club. But it was challenging. I used to pick her up late sometimes, so you'd have all of that guilt as well. And you know, you just had to find a way to cope. But luckily, one of the mums in her class had become a play leader. So sometimes if I was running late, she'd take her home. That support meant a lot to me, but I also felt really guilty, because it was like, you know, I can't be there to pick my child up on time. How do I keep that balance going with trying to develop in my career and looking after my child? So because of some of those challenges, I then looked at the interim market, and some colleagues had gone into it. And I also saw it as a way to gain experience really quickly, while also learning how to adapt to change and building relationships and trust with people. If you go into the interim market, that's absolutely essential. You need to be adaptable. You absolutely have to turn up fully qualified and skilled, but you do need to be adaptable and able to build relationships. And it's also a part of leadership as well. That's how you get you gain influence, and you use that influence to build relationships. So I went for that, still with the regret of not having gone through Nye Bevan and for the PMO role. So I decided to challenge myself and go with that. And then, of course, what happened? I sat at home for about 6 weeks with no role coming up. So that was, I think, November 2017. And I was regretting all my life choices throughout the whole of December and up to Christmas. And I was like, what have I done? I have ruined my life. And I was about to call Hillingdon to say, please take me back. I'll take whatever job you can give me. However, in the January, I got my first interim role at Eastern North Hearts. And from Eastern North Hearts, as I said, I learned how to adapt fast. You really have to adapt fast. And I built really good relationships and trust quite quickly. And also, you have to protect your reputation. And again, your reputation comes from how you interact with others, how you deliver the job, because in interim work, you're only as good as your last contract. So you absolutely have to deliver. I was at Eastern North for about 8 months, and then they recruited. And then I went to do a very, very short stint at Papworth. I managed 10 days. The commute nearly killed me. So after 10 days, I said, I can't do this anymore. And just trying to manage the childcare was an absolute nightmare. So then I went back again to Eastern North because they had another role come up. And then in the October, I came to Watford. And I guess my trajectory really changed from there, because even though I was doing head of finance roles at Watford, I was always keeping my eye out for other opportunities that would allow me to continue to develop. So by the time COVID hit, I was just about to leave Watford, but for me, I think it was a full circle moment, because as I was about to leave Watford, the efficiency and PMO team needed leadership, and they approached me to say, would you like to lead this team? And I was like, a few years ago, I was supposed to do this, but here I am now. So I took the role on, absolutely. And at the same time, the trust was developing the integrated care partnership even, which we now call the healthcare partnership. And I was asked to be the finance lead. So I was involved in several projects, including our famous virtual hospital, plus other integrated projects. And all of these projects linked with my role with efficiency, because they were to help with reducing surge costs and bed days, which would allow us to deliver the efficiencies that we wanted to. I was given one job across all of those, which was to make sure that we increase the amount of efficiencies that we're delivering. So every year since I've taken over the team, we have done that, even though it has been a small team and it has been a struggle. I'm quite goal oriented. So I was really focused on making sure that I deliver on that goal. So each and every single year, by hook or by crook, we've delivered additional efficiencies. But in terms of some of the development and progressing through, as we've been developing the HCP, in the early days, there used to be a system CFO meeting, which was all the system CFOs putting their heads together to think through how do we make integration happen and how do you avoid things like stranded costs in one organization while the other organization is progressing. So I was the most junior person in the room. Everybody else was a CFO or a deputy CFO. And I'd sit there thinking, why am I here? I'm the most junior person, and I'd say to my boss, I don't think I should be in the room. And then he'd ask me, why shouldn't you be in the room? Tell me what your ideas are. And I'd say this, that, and he'd go, but that's exactly what so-and-so CFO said. So you have the same type of thinking. So why do you think you shouldn't be here? And I realized that imposter syndrome was quite a big thing for me. And I'm really grateful to my boss because he's really helped me to work through all of that. He doesn't allow me to sit there and think, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. He just goes, but why wouldn't you? And then he just pushes me even more into those things that I'm slightly nervous about. So I think it's really important that if you've got a good ally and someone who can support you in leadership, you absolutely must go for it. Because it can be lonely and you can think that, oh, I'm a leader, I have to do this perfectly, I have to do this by myself and face all your self-doubt. I don't think that that's the case. I think being an effective leader also means that you lean on others so that they can help you to develop as well. I've given the job the best that I can, and I've continued to do that, which has allowed for me to get to where I am now. And because of my curiosity, I'm always putting my nose in things that I really shouldn't be. So I then also put my nose into business planning for the trust, and I ended up with that being in my portfolio as well. So I think I've been leading business planning since 22, 23. And I won't lie, there was a lot of resistance for me leading that, particularly for finance to lead that, because it's operational planning. However, the money and the workforce do count as well. So ever since I've been leading that, like I said, we've been improving on the efficiencies. And I had to push through all of that pushback that I received. And again, if you are not good with receiving feedback, you'd really struggle with this because there is so much feedback that you get. Everyone will throw stones at your glass house and tell you how they would have done it better, et cetera, et cetera. So I've had to learn how to listen and not take it personally, but listen to the constructive bits. There will be bits that people are going to say that is just their personal opinion, but there's always something constructive to hear from somebody's criticism. So I've taken that on and tried to do better. I'm slightly worried that I'm going over time. But I just wanted to focus and just put that out there, that you do have to listen on at feedback and receive it, whether it's good or bad. I also think that to be a good leader, you also need to be able to leverage the existing relationships that you have and to build good relationships. So one of the reasons why we've continued to deliver really well on our efficiency program is because our chief nurse and our chief medical officer are very bought into the process. I also have the benefit of having worked with our chief nurse previously at Eastern North Hearts when we were both in cancer, and we've done efficiencies together before. We had a really great working relationship. So when she came to Watford, it's like we just picked up where we left off, and we've been able to almost eliminate agency usage at West Hearts. And we are on our way to obviously not eliminating bank, but absolutely reducing bank spend to absolute minimum, because we've done really well with recruitment and our staffing controls. And because we've done so well with nursing, medical is now following, and they also want to get in on the good news story. So again, relationship building is absolutely important. I think now where I am, there's new challenges coming up. So as I talked about the healthcare partnership, it's been a bit of a slow burner. But in 2025, we got delegation of community services from Hearts and West Essex ICB. And now we're trying to work through what does that actually mean. We've also launched a neighborhood transformation fund with Macmillan Cancer Care, which is a form of impact investment and allows for the NHS to pursue transformational projects without the one-year funding cliff edge. This is new. It's very different, and you're dealing with, and it's real sort of like proper finance, in terms of investment and returns, etc. And you're being measured on outcomes. So there's a different rigor and discipline required, but I'm also definitely up for the challenge. As I said, I'm quite goal focused. So whatever challenge you throw at me, I give it my best shot, but I don't just work on it on my own. I try and bring in other people with me to be able to keep pushing through and develop the projects. What I would say about myself is, even though I didn't necessarily want to be a deputy CFO or a director, I thought I was going to be absolutely in the operations. I even imagined myself as a coup. But my curiosity and willingness to break the mold have shaped a portfolio that now blends finance, operations, and transformation. And I would say to anyone who's looking to develop, don't be scared. You do have to have the courage to stand up for yourself. Imposter syndrome does come up for some people more than others, but it's also the messaging that you give yourself. If you tell yourself that I can only stop at this level, then that's where you will stop. So yeah, I think be the best that you can be, and have that curiosity. And let's just remember why we're here. We are here for the patients. We are here to make that experience better. We ourselves are also consumers of the NHS, and we need to think about what kind of NHS do we want to see. So it's not just about the nursing and the doctors, but we want to make sure that we've got good pathways, good quality, good clinical care, and good leadership, and how we use the taxpayers' money. I'm going to stop there because I feel like I've talked a lot.
Thank you. And thanks to both of you. Fantastic stories, but really two really different stories, but with some common themes. First of all, that you're both inspirational, very strong women, and you've achieved so much in your careers already. I also believe neither of you have peaked yet. But that's also for both of you to decide. But some things coming through that we probably will bring out a little bit more with some of the questions. I'm going to kick off with a question just now. I'm keen to explore some of the challenges in a bit more depth that you face currently in your role. I think you've gone through quite a lot of the challenges that you faced over the years, and some of the planning or lack of planning that's gone into your career, and how you've taken opportunities and run with them to get where you are. Some of your values have come through as well. So Nyasha, yours of curiosity, and Chris, yours are around alignment, values, and impact. But let's talk a bit more about the challenges or the tough parts of your job just now. What are some of the tough parts of your role right now? And how do you make sure that you deliver a really sort of strong, consistent message in line with your values? I'll ask that first to Chris, if that's okay. Give you a bit of a breather, Nyasha.
That was fantastic, Nyasha. It was a privilege to listen to that, so thank you for sharing. Yeah, okay. So I think the hardest part for me is probably holding on to the complexity while trying to communicate simply. And I think somebody popped something in the chat before, didn't they, about being able to translate complex messages for colleagues as well. So I think it's especially pertinent when decisions affect people as well. So I'm very deliberate about being honest, consistent, and calm. I think tend to repeat messages a few times, explain the rationale behind it, avoid any false reassurance, because I think consistency builds trust. Even when the message is difficult, I think that consistency really helps. So for me, it's about clarity and repetition, and I think they are acts of leadership probably in the current climate that we're working in.
Thanks, Chris. I think I remember when we did our briefing on this as well, that you told me that the way that you communicate at work is exactly the same as at home.
That's true.
Yeah.
I do. I have found it's quite successful with the children at home, that they appreciate the same sort of level of clarity and consistency. And I do try and be. I get feedback that I am the same person a lot of the time, and that people know that what they're going to get with me. And I think that's really important, because that helps to build trust, and it means people do tend to approach you and sometimes overshare, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's especially important right now with some of the challenges that the NHS faces and that staff are feeling, and the impact it can have on staff morale as well if they feel that they're not part of knowing the full story. So thank you for that. Nyasha, what about you? What are some of the tougher parts of your role, and how do you maintain the consistency of the message?
So the hardest bit, I think, is always being looked at the person who's going to say no. Because obviously everybody's asking for, we need this, we need that, there's investment required. I think the way that I've managed that is quite a sly way. I hope there's nobody from operations on this call at West Herts, but I attend the SMT. So all the deputy directors of operations, they meet with the coup every week on a Tuesday. So I attend that meeting, and we can have quite frank conversations in that meeting for the reasons why something needs to happen or doesn't need to happen. So by the time it gets to Rodney, my boss, I've managed to filter the message and manage that message through. So I think I'm going to come back and just say it's about that relationship building. That's kind of how I get through it. And so before a business case comes through or whatever, I normally get a phone call to say, Nyasha, this is what I'm thinking about doing. I'm going to be asking for this kind of money. However, I'm going to do this, this, and that to be able to save. So even though you're spending this, you're still going to get this kind of benefit. So it's like getting everybody to understand that we need to be able to see what that outcome is going to be, not just continuing to invest. And I'm not saying no for the sake of saying no, but it's about what's the outcome that we're looking for and what's the long-term impact. I think that's one of the things that we've not been so good at. And I'd say as in the NHS as a whole is looking at the long-term impact of some of our choices. Sometimes you might say no today, but the unintended consequence is that in 6 months' time, RTT performance starts to slip. And you don't remember why. Why is it slipping? Because 6 months ago, you decided not to do this one thing that would have been short-term pain, but the gain would have been much more in the long term. So that's kind of how I manage it.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to come in with another question, if that's okay, and then maybe we'll do one or two more and then see if there's any from the audience. So I guess maybe back to Chris to start us off, but if you think about through your career and, I'm sure there's been, you mentioned in the beginning some kind of particularly demanding periods of time. What is it that you think has helped you stay most aligned with your purpose and your own kind of ambitions during those really tricky times? Is there anything more you can say about that, or even kind of thinking about your own well-being? How do you sort of maintain and protect your own well-being while there's lots of competing priorities?
So I think that's a really good question, and there's multiple layers to it. I think the first thing for me is probably trying to keep purpose and priorities separated from each other, because I think your priorities can change, but your purpose probably shouldn't. So for me, purpose is about stewardship. To talk in finance terms, it's about using finance to create a bit of stability, fairness, and better outcomes for patients and staff. And when things shift, I tend to think about, does the decision still align with the core principles? So going back to Nyasha's point there, and if it does, how do I adapt and deliver that without losing my sense of why? So it's about anchoring to principles, I suppose. And then in terms of I think you asked about well-being, didn't you? I think it is really tricky. These jobs are really, really stressful. So I think what helps me is just to recognize that resilience isn't actually about endurance, and it's sometimes it's about it's that prioritization. So I know in the past I've reduced non-essential commitments, looked for support. People do want to help, and as Nyasha said before, one of the strengths to find in being a leader is to notice where you've got areas which aren't your strengths, and then look for other people to work with you to complement you on that as well. I just think sometimes our own recovery and looking after ourselves actually is a little bit of a leadership skill as well. So I think for me, I tend to be really clear about what genuinely requires my involvement and what doesn't, and try and protect time to think. And it sounds really cheesy, but model realistic behaviours as well. Long hours doesn't mean greater commitment. And boundaries aren't necessarily about doing less either. They're about doing the right things and doing them really well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the whole kind of knowing what your own sort of resilience, I guess what your own themes are and their own things that you need to kind of recognise in yourself to maintain resilience is really important. Nyasha, anything you want to add to that one?
I think everything that Chris said is absolutely correct. And I think there's also something about how we come across as leaders and how we think of ourselves. So I'm quite outcomes focused. I'm not necessarily worried that you have to do everything within your prescribed 37.5 or slightly more hours in the week, or between core hours. So one of the things where I felt if I'm feeling quite overwhelmed or under pressure, I do just tend to give myself an hour, 2 hours away from the computer to try and reset, and then come back. And if it means that I'm not going to do something between, 11 and 1, but I'll do it between 7 and 9 instead, I'm quite comfortable with doing that. And I've tried to communicate that to my team as well, that I'm more focused on what the outcomes are going to be rather than you being there the whole time, because absolutely burnout is a real thing, especially in jobs like this that are high pressured. And like, I'll speak from my own experience, the efficiency agenda. I don't know how many times I've heard the words, the most strategically important thing for the trust to do is to make sure that we deliver the efficiency agenda. That is pressure. Just those words are pressure. In any setting, that is a lot of pressure, and you just have to keep thinking, okay, how do I make this happen with the little resource that we have? How do I push these guys to give us even more? So I then have to also take a step back, take a deep breath, and then come back to that as well, and then support the rest of the teams, particularly the operational teams that are facing quite a significant challenge as well in terms of delivering on performance standards, on making sure that their rotas are safe, etc., etc. How do I also then make sure that I'm giving them the space and the time to be able to think about those things? And again, that's why I said attending that Tuesday meeting, sometimes it is everybody throwing stuff at me about why it's not working and I'm asking for too much. We've done a little mini turnaround within the trust, not turnaround as such, but really focusing on our spend. And that's taken time as well for them to do. So sometimes you also have to just take it that everybody's going to be throwing stuff at you. And then you have to find a way to get rid of that stuff and then come back and be positive again the next day. And it comes back again to purpose as well, as Chris mentioned. So what is our purpose? Why are we here?
Thank you. I've just noticed Amanda has her hand up to poised and ready to ask a question. Amanda, do you want to?
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you both for such great presentations. Just wanted to touch on allyship. So I think Nyasha, particularly, you talked around having a really strong ally, and your current line manager is really supportive of the direction that you have progressed in your career. I similarly throughout my career have had some really great allies that have really supported me to achieve what I wanted to achieve, but equally have come across some really poor male behaviours and some quite challenging times with that. So just wanted to learn from both of you really whether you've got any top tips for that, and just how do we involve those allies more in this? Looking around the attendance today, it is heavily dominated by females. So how do we get that message out there more clearly that we need that ally support?
Shall I start? Sorry.
Chris, yeah.
So thank you for the question. I think it links in really nicely to a question we've got in the chat a little bit earlier up as well from Lillian. I don't know if you saw that one, Nicola, about relationships. I think they're quite...
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. If you can take both of them on, that's fantastic. Thank you.
If that's okay, because I do think it is really important. Relationships are absolutely critical, aren't they? Because communication underpins absolutely everything that we do. And I do think that relationships are the currency for success, which is what Lillian said. But I just think that as women, we sometimes overcomplicate what that means, especially when we're already stretched. I mean, both myself and Nyasha have talked about working in what are really stressful full-time roles whilst trying to juggle being single or sole parents as well. And let's be honest, you know, those little people that rely on us do need quite a lot from us as well, don't they? So I think for me, we don't need a wide network or lots of informal time. What matters probably is more sort of a small number of high quality, really purposeful relationships. And I think for me, it comes back to what I said before about actually being intentional. Relationships don't always have to be social. They can just be built through doing good work together and being reliable, following through. And it's that consistency I talked about before, because consistency will build trust faster than availability, won't it? And probably we can integrate relationship building into the work that we're already doing as well. If you run a well-run meeting, a thoughtful follow-up following a meeting, or you take 5 minutes just to listen to someone. You know, I said tongue-in-cheek before that sometimes people overshare, but the value that people place just on being able to walk through, sorry, the door's over there, that's why I'm pointing, to walk through that door at any time and tell me anything. It does a few things. It really makes people feel valued and listened to, but I do find really cheekily it means that in the future they tell you something that you really need to know to do your job properly. So it actually really helps you do your job better as well. So relationships can be built into the work that you're already doing. I think you've got presence in the time that we've already got, if that makes sense. And I think one of the other things, and I say this quite sensitively, is that actually we should focus on mutual value and it's not about self-promotion, because the strongest relationships I've got are built on people, are built with people who know what I stand for. They know integrity is my strongest value. They know how I work. They know I'm going to be consistent, fair and honest. And that reputation does travel with you, even if you're not still in the room. It is always there. So I think we don't have to do networking in the way that other people do it. Just build relationships in a way that fits your life and your values, and just take a deep breath with it every time, because I think that depth in relationships beats multiple relationships every single time. And I think it's the same with allies as well, which is why I wanted to link that question and response back to what was in the chat. So I hope that was okay.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, great. And I think that thing around sort of the credibility and consistency is really powerful, isn't it? It's like you say, if that's sort of you and your values, then that kind of sticks with you, like you say, regardless of whether you're in the room. Is there anything, Nyasha, you want to add to that one as well, or your own kind of take on that question?
To be honest, I don't think I could have said it any better than the way Chris said it. I think it's absolutely a team sport to be able to do this, and I think you need to be available, and also the results that you give, that's what gives you credibility. I think in terms of allyship, one thing that I would say is it's also about being honest about your experiences. I will overshare, even though I've been asked not to say too much detail, but I do remember one experience where it was 1 month end and things went really wrong and there was no real explanation. I'm just reporting the numbers. It's not me that's made it go wrong. And there was an experience where a surgeon really tried to twist the whole situation and make it look like it was my issue and that sort of thing. And I remember storming into my boss's office absolutely furious. Like I couldn't hold my fury in, to just explain, this is what's just happened to me, and I need a minute just to calm down. And he gave me that space to be able to calm down and then explain what the situation was. And I think it's about being able to communicate when weird experiences happen to us. The surgeon was male, and if you can explain that, okay, yes, I was furious, but I did manage to calm down and explain myself properly. But being able to explain yourself to one particular ally or another is actually quite important, so that men then understand what it feels like to be on the other side. They don't always realize that this is how they come across sometimes, I think. So it's really helpful to be able to talk, and also to talk as women as well, because sometimes it's quite easy to internalize some of these things and you've got to be able to communicate yourself out of it sometimes. And I think that's also how you build on the allyship.
Thank you. Thanks, Naisha. I've just noticed that Lucy's popped a question in the chat function. Lucy, do you want to ask a question? Looks like a very good one. Or do you want me to ask it on your behalf?
No, I can ask, that's fine. Yes, so I've got 2 young children at the moment, and I have a military spouse who is never ever at home. So obviously my own personal challenges, but I've got lots of family that help me. But I found that since having the kids, I've completely lost my confidence to be able to go for the more senior roles. I was just wondering if you had any advice. I feel like I'm probably ready at work, but the fear of it is just too much. I feel like I won't be able to juggle everything. And I think the thought of failing is just too much for me. So I just wondered if anyone had any advice of how I can overcome that and actually start going for these more senior roles.
Yeah, I think that's a really brave question, Lucy. And I just want to say that really, really clearly, what you're describing is really common. It doesn't mean that you're not capable of doing the job. So let's be clear, it just means you're carrying more responsibility. Having children, and then obviously you've described your partner there, clearly adds complexity. I was going to say like military service, but obviously, excuse the pun on that one, it doesn't reduce your ability to do the senior roles at all. It just changes your risk tolerance, if you want to use the phrase that we use in work all the time. You're not just betting on yourself, are you? You're protecting and thinking about your whole family. I would challenge a little bit the idea that your family circumstances should limit you, because in reality, I think the circumstances you've got at home, and this is how I think of myself, the circumstances that you've got at home actually are building the skills that you need in senior roles, because you're talking about judgment and prioritization and resilience and perspective. So I don't think the fear is evidence you can't do the job. It's just evidence that you understand the weight of the responsibility of doing the job. So what helped me, what you could think about, is not thinking or asking, can I do the role perfectly? But it's more, actually, could I do the first 6 months well enough to learn in that role? Because actually senior roles aren't really about knowing everything on day one. It's about learning fast and leading calmly as well. And confidence, it's not going to come back before you make the move. It's going to come after you've made the move. So if you wait to feel fearless, you might wait a very long time. Just apply, have the conversation, ask them about flexibility, ask them about support. So that way the decision's mutual as well, because you want to be allowed to progress, but you also need a bit of stability, don't you? And I don't think those two things should cancel each other out. And if you wanted to chat outside of this, more than happy that you or anybody else gets in touch if you want a conversation or to help prep for any roles or anything. Please do, and just remember you're doing an amazing job. It is hard and you're doing a fantastic job, and you can go on to do other roles. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
Lucy, if you want to speak to, we could have a separate chat in addition to that as well. I'm just very briefly, Naisha, do you have anything to add to that before I do? I've got a sort of quick summary to do because we're approaching the end. I can't believe it. An hour's gone by so quickly. I've been entranced by you two. Anything you want to add very quickly?
No, I think everything that Chris said is absolutely right. And I would just encourage to say it's a bit of a risky attitude to have, but you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So the worst they can do is say no. So just try and prove to yourself that you can do it. As Chris said, you don't have to be 100% able at every single bit of the role. But if you feel that you are ready and you can take it on, then absolutely try.
Thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our session, and I know that Sarah and Chris both have to leave pretty sharpish. I will be staying around on the call for 5 or 10 minutes or so if anyone else wants to stay on. But I just wanted to say a massive thank you to our speakers today. That's been a really, really interesting, thought-provoking, inspirational session. We've heard from 2 very brave, strong, humble and successful women. 3 if we add you in as well, Sarah. But yeah, I've really enjoyed hearing your stories and the experiences that you've had, and I hope that the audience today, our networks, and enjoyed and picked up on them as well. a couple of things just to start moving forward. We are in the process of agreeing our conference, our in-person conference, which will take place in July actually this year. Sarah and I are meeting with our steering group later this month to explore some of the plan for the day in more depth. But if you want to earmark the 6th of July as the day that will take place, it will be in London, but more details to come out. But we're working on that at the moment. But all it really rests to say is thank you everyone for attending today. We had over 150 on the call, which is a great number, and I really hope that you enjoyed hearing from our speakers, and there's something here that will help you deal with high pressure roles in periods of high stress and high turbulence in the NHS, and will support you all in achieving that going forward. Thank you again. And please do stay on if you want to chat. And if you want to ask any more questions or if there's anything we can do to help, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So I've stopped